Bom dia. Vamos começar aqui a conferência de hoje, da ANPOCS. Em nome da ANPOCS, eu gostaria de agradecer o Centro Cultural Brasil-Turquia, que tornou possível a vinda do professor Mark Weber. O professor Mark Weber é um especialista em religião, vem trabalhando com isso já há bastante tempo, é professor da Universidade do Texas e vem já há bastante tempo estudando as religiões não ocidentais, né, tem um trabalho importante nessa área, e o assunto sobre o qual ele vai nos falar hoje é também esse, né, ele vai apresentar para a gente reflexões que ele vem fazendo a respeito de um movimento de grande importância na Turquia, mas que também se expandiu pelo mundo. E nós queríamos muito agradecer a presença dele, a gentileza de ter vindo especialmente a Caxambu para essa conferência. Eu vou então passar a palavra para ele. Muito obrigada, professor, por ter vindo. Prazer. My pleasure. So now you can start, you can go there. Stay here as you wish.
Maybe no.
You go there.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. This is a little like church up here. Okay. It's an honor for me to be invited to give this talk, and an honor and a pleasure for me to come to Brazil for the first time. I think I may not go home now. I may stay. I'm sorry, I don't have enough Portuguese to speak to you in Portuguese, so you'll have to make do with my English. I am, after all, from the United States, and so I only speak one language well. So, without further ado, let me begin. The Gülen movement, sometimes called the Hizmet movement, and I think that's now the preferred name, is an international movement of volunteers organizing financial capital and human effort to serve the broader community. In the beginning, the movement was populated entirely by Turkish Muslims, and even today, most participants in the movement are motivated by religious faith. One of the values that the movement supports is the value of education, especially in the sciences. But knowledge claims in science and in religion frequently come into conflict, or at least appear to come into conflict. So this talk will describe how that problem presents in particular for the Hizmet movement, and I will discuss it through the lens of doxastic practice epistemology. Don't be frightened by the name. It's a very simple idea. And then I hope to outline what possible responses are to scientific and religious conflict of belief, and in particular, what avenues are open to members of the Hizmet movement to deal with potential conflict. And I'm going to close with what I think is kind of a cautionary note that though there are no conflicts of this sort presenting right now, because of the way the Hizmet movement thinks about science and also thinks about religion, that it's still possible that there could be conflict, and solving that conflict in a rational way may involve some kind of sacrifice. So we'll see how that goes. So first, about the movement itself. While it is impossible to put a precise date on the beginnings of movements like these, it's probably safe to say that the Gülen movement's educational efforts began around 1970, when the military influence on the government in Turkey underlined some of the strengths and weaknesses of Turkey's form of secularism. Gülen started by establishing what he called lighthouses, ışık evleri, and I'll discuss exactly what those are a little bit later, and soon began encouraging his friends and associates to establish schools. As it became clear that the schools were producing students who were both good people and academic standouts of high academic standards, the movement widened its goals to encourage and improve the education available to all the children of Turkey. The most visible of the movement's educational institutions are the schools themselves. In Turkey, they're private schools from the elementary grades through high school. Although they are private, they're still subject to the same rules as the public schools and offer exactly the same curriculum. This is a matter of law. They must also charge tuition, as all private schools do, but the sponsors of the schools also fund scholarships to ensure that this kind of education is available to the poor as well. They are secular schools, again, by law, even though those who establish them have a religious motivation. They have two main aims: to prepare their students for further academic work by providing a good grounding in science, mathematics, and languages, and to encourage good moral character, primarily by example. Religious subjects are not taught except as objective academic subjects. And that, in fact, is mandated by the secular government. All the schools offer a history of religions. But teachers are expected to model good moral character, and they work extensively outside the classroom to encourage the students' academic and moral development. This is one of the distinctive things about teachers in the Hizmet schools. Since not all their students are Muslims, many are secular, many are of other religions, the schools are always careful to espouse only universal values that adherents of any religion, and in fact no religion at all, can respect. They meet with each of their students at least once every term in their homes to find out how they can help beyond their classroom duties. This means frequently spending every waking hour doing something related to teaching. It's an astounding commitment. Beyond the obligations associated with teaching, the teachers in these schools frequently get reassigned to other schools. They move around, taking their experience with them. Since the teachers are not paid any more than public school teachers, taking such a position calls for extraordinary commitment. While these Hizmet schools have been established in most major towns in Turkey, not every town or village has a school. For this reason, participants in the movement have established dormitories in the cities. This is sort of an extension of the educational mission, so that children from smaller towns and villages can come to the city and attend a Hizmet school. The dormitories are staffed by those same teachers and others who help the students with their studies, provide a safe environment, and set a good moral example. Because of this commitment to a safe and wholesome environment, these schools and dormitories are attractive to parents who otherwise are not committed to the movement. So these schools are popular well outside the movement as well. And these dormitories are taken advantage of by people outside the movement. And of course, not all of the students who attend Hizmet schools are equally well placed, financially or socially, to take advantage of their opportunity. This is a general problem when there's income inequality, that poorer students may be admitted to a good school but not have the academic background to succeed. So, for these people, the movement established what they call study rooms. These study rooms provide extra study opportunities in the afternoons and on weekends. The aim is to make sure that every student in school has a chance to learn as well as possible, so that all have an equal chance to perform well, particularly on the standardized tests all Turkish school children take. The study rooms, of course, are open to students from the public schools as well. They're not confined to children of people in the movement. The Turkish high school system aims at preparing students for the countrywide college placement exam. How a student performs on that exam determines what kind of college or university he can attend, and so can make an enormous difference to the future course of that student's life. And so this is a very high pressure, high tension situation. Because of this situation, institutions called dershanes have been established to help students prepare effectively for these exams, much like the institutions in the US that are designed to help people prepare for the SAT, the GRE, GMAT, and LSAT, and the like. So the people in the movement have also established dershanes to try to help less advantaged students have a better chance on the exams, and so a better chance in the future. So this is a wide variety of institutional approaches to prop up education. The first institutions to be established in the early days of the movement's educational efforts are the lighthouses, Işık Evleri, as I was saying before. These are houses provided for a small monthly contribution or for free to students that can't afford any contribution, to university students who need a place to stay while they're attending university. The students live an average of 5 to a house, sometimes more, sometimes less, one of whom is senior to the others and responsible for the household. They live a moderately austere life together, like many university students do around the world, and they keep a modest Islamic household. In return for this accommodation, they are asked to be available to tutor high school children, and almost all follow up on that and express their gratitude for the housing by offering their services as tutors. The obvious question is, how is a network of institutions like this supported? Well, they're built and maintained by the financing of sponsors, who are mostly businessmen who want to return some of their prosperity to the community. While many are quite wealthy owners of large businesses, there are sponsors of all degrees of prosperity. Some may underwrite the building of a new facility, a whole new building. Others may fund scholarships or support educational efforts in smaller ways. The sponsors are a crucial part of the movement, but just as crucial are the people in the movement who contribute time and talent rather than money. Many of these grassroots volunteers are previous beneficiaries of the institutions themselves. And now that the movement is entering its second generation, maybe third generation by now, I don't know, even the sponsors are frequently people who have benefited from the schools and the lighthouses. So they see that they've been able to have a prosperous life, partly because of this preparation, and so they want to provide financial support for other people to have that same opportunity. The guiding principles of the movement from the beginning have been two things. Hizmet, which is the Turkish word for service, and it gives its name to the movement as well, the Hizmet movement. That's primarily what it's about, service to humanity. And the other value is korban, which is a Turkish word, also comes from Arabic, and it means, literally it means sacrifice, like when you sacrifice an animal. But it's understood in a more metaphorical way to mean giving up something for the sake of God and for other people. It's a kind of altruistic motivation. And these values are rooted in Islam. They amount to the idea that it is an honor to serve the needs of others, and so people should be eager to serve without expecting any reward. It's interesting that this reflects a basic idea in Buddhism, that when someone gives a gift, it's the giver who should be grateful, because he's the one that receives the benefit to his own character. So, they have these religious beliefs rooted in their sacred texts, many Muslims, some Christians, some Jewish, and some others. And they're also committed to the value of science. In being committed to broadly secular education, the movement is committed to the value of scientific knowledge in particular. Gulen himself speaks, as others have before him, of nature as a second source of revelation about the nature of God. Even scientists in the Renaissance would talk about the book of Scripture and the book of nature, right? So, in this view, and the view of others in the movement, the pursuit of scientific knowledge is critical to participation in the modern world, and also a religious duty. At the same time, the movement is rooted in traditional, theologically conservative understanding of Islam, historically and also to some extent in the present. So what is revealed to humanity in the Quran and Hadith is accepted as known with certainty. Though, of course, and this is an important caveat, the individual's understanding of what is in Quran and Hadith is fallible. This is a very important point that we can take advantage of later. It is a commonplace in contemporary theory of knowledge that human beings avail themselves of many different ways to acquire knowledge. Our senses provide one avenue, memory provides another, reasoning provides another, and so on. Most of these avenues of knowledge are windows on the world. That is to say, they all provide information about the spatio-temporal world we all inhabit, the world we inhabit together. As a result, they provide a generally consistent picture. When the deliverances of one sense contradict those of another, so say when something looks like a fire, but when you come up to it, it doesn't feel hot, then you suspect that something is up. We see a problem that requires a resolution, and usually further application of the senses, right? Further investigation provides that resolution. So we have this very stable, very consistent set of knowledge-forming apparatuses that we're born with, that work together to give us a more or less consistent picture of the world we live in. What is more controversial is the claim that there are ways of knowing that provide insights into aspects of reality other than the physical world. To give less controversial examples, moral sense and aesthetic insights and aesthetic judgment may be avenues of knowledge of this kind. There's no concern that either our moral sense or our aesthetic judgment will ever give us grounds for beliefs that contradict the deliverances of our senses, because we don't see the same kinds of things as our conscience intuits, say, or our sense of beauty. They're not on the same topic, and so they can't contradict one another. This is the normal situation. Our sources of knowledge either agree with one another, in the long run, of course, with minor and temporary exceptions, or they give us information about completely different realms, the moral realm versus the physical world, and so on. So, suppose then, as some have said, that religious experience or religion provides a way of knowing. What are we to make of apparent contradictions between religious belief and science in particular? This is a live issue in much of the world today, where fundamentalist interpretations of scriptures tell one story about, say, the origin of life, and science tells another, and different people respond differently. If revelation or scripture or prophecy tells us something that is contradicted by science, historically, religion has yielded to science. Religion has found a way to accommodate. But that's not the only possible response to apparent conflict. So I would like to lay out different logically possible positions people can take on the relation between science and religion, and show how this analysis makes trouble for the idea of religion as an avenue of knowledge. To begin with, we can divide the possible responses into two kinds. You can think either that science and religion are ultimately incompatible, that the claims the two systems make cannot all be true, or you can think that they are ultimately compatible. If you think they're incompatible, I like to call this view pessimism, you have a decision to make. If they can't both be right, you know one of them is wrong, but the inconsistency itself doesn't tell you which one. So some people who trust the history and track record of science have decided that religion itself is intellectually disreputable, that it's fantasy, that it's psychological illness or whatever. And so they abandon all religious claims. Famous examples in the English-speaking world, Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins, for example, and virtually every Enlightenment atheist that ever was take this view. The science and religion do conflict, and so much the worse for religion. We should abandon religion as a pre-modern, Bronze Age vestige. They believe by its nature science is directed toward truth, and it's true that science is designed to be directed toward truth and self-correcting. And there's no reason to suppose that religious traditions have that same truth-directed quality. If this view is right, then religion, to remain viable, must revise its doctrinal commitments. So that's one kind of response, is pessimism about the possibility of resolution. But not all pessimists are scientific pessimists. Some, reasoning this way, science admits it's fallible, but God, or the Vedas, or the Buddha, cannot be wrong, decide to jettison science instead. In this camp, we find the young earth creationists and intelligent design theorists like William Dembski. It's important to understand, though, that it's not only Christianity that harbors religious pessimists of this kind. In the late 11th, early 12th century, a Muslim philosopher named Al-Ghazali applied rigorous logical reasoning to matters of cosmology and philosophy. He was a great philosopher. But in the end, he decided that the whole enterprise was self-refuting. He gave up philosophy, became a Sufi mystic, and wrote a book called The Incoherence of the Philosophers. I love that title. I wish I'd thought of it. He would say that if reason contradicts God, then so much the worse for reason. Right? Not just science, but reason. Science, after all, is just sort of regimented common sense, disciplined reason about the world. Moreover, there are Hindus and Buddhists who take their scriptures' claims about the origin of the universe and humankind as literally true, and therefore reject the claims of modern science. It used to be a part of Hindu and Buddhist cosmology that there's a huge mountain, Mount Meru, in the center of the earth, and the earth is shaped like a disc, and the continents are sort of shaped like bananas and arranged around Mount Meru in a great ocean. They thought that was literally how the world is shaped. To this day, to this very day, there are Hindu fundamentalists who take issue with modern geography. They think somehow that must be true. And of course, they take issue with the theory of evolution, not because it makes the earth too old, but rather makes it too young. The earth has existed for billions of years and gone through cycles and stuff, so the earth is much older than science says. So you might be a religious pessimist, or you might be a scientific pessimist. But there's actually a third kind of pessimist position one can take, but it isn't very popular. You can think, like Tertullian, the 2nd, 3rd century Christian thinker, that science and religion are incompatible, and that's perfectly okay. Right? There's not even a problem here. Of course, it's a little odd to talk about 2nd century science, since science is really a modern invention. But there certainly was an idea of knowledge of the natural world then, and Tertullian is famous for having said, "Credo quia absurdum est." I believe it because it doesn't make any sense. He thought that the very inconsistency of Christian doctrine with common sense was a mark in its favor. For him, incoherence is not a problem. That's an odd position and not shared